Today, we are discussing the players that we consider to be cornerstones in your Dynasty leagues, and we're going to separate these guys into tiers, so stick around for all of that and more. Hello, and welcome into the Dino Construction Podcast. Today, we introduce our Cornerstone Player Tiers. Now, this is an elite group of Dynasty assets that combine youth with high-end production. These are those rare players that don't just help you win now, but they help define your roster's identity for years to come. We explain what makes a player a Cornerstone player, how to identify them in your leagues, and why understanding this tier can sharpen your team building process, whether you're contending, rebuilding, or stuck in between. Now, David, can you define a cornerstone player for us here?
So this is something we've talked about a lot, or at least alluded to in our roster building discussions, or when we talk about trade assets and things. These are basically the players you build around. I probably would call them more core players when I'm just talking randomly, but cornerstone asset, a common term here as well. But basically, like you said at the top, man, they're young, they're high scoring. You want to build around them. There are very few of them, so they're rare, and that rarity makes them incredibly valuable. I believe we have 24 players on this list, so you figure a few guys that age themselves out of this list still going to make it in the startup first couple rounds. So these players are probably all gone by the end of round 3, maybe even a little before that. So, they're hard to get, and they're players you love. We did put some ages on them. I've seen some places, some different content creators just use one age for everything. I think that makes sense. We talked about it. We thought, quarterback typically go a little longer than wide receivers, tight ends. Running backs typically have a little shorter of a shelf life. We didn't want to separate it by too much, so we just said quarterbacks 26 or younger qualify, wide receivers and tight ends that are 25 or younger qualify, and running backs at 24 or younger qualify.
I just think what's so unique about cornerstones is you have players that are high-end producers, but they're not young, or you have players that are just young but aren't proven. So these guys, they have the combination of both. So that's why they're so valuable to our Dynasty leagues. Now let's go ahead and start looking at who we have in these tiers. In the first tier, we only have one guy, and that is quarterback Jayden Daniels. And this is because in Superflex leagues, which is our standard format that we always talk about, quarterbacks are king, and he had a phenomenal rookie year. He's probably going to be the highest valued player in a lot of Dynasty leagues. Lamar and Josh Allen are right there, but he's somebody that's going to be very, very expensive to get. So, he's being drafted as a top 4 quarterback in redraft, and he's just going into his second year.
Yeah, he's a unique player here. We did have some debate as to whether he should be alone, maybe put Jamar in here. But look, like you said, man, it's super flex. This guy's 24. His rookie year, he was QB5 on a team that we did not think had a chance. Their best offensive player, Terry McLaurin, still hadn't had that elite level season, even though we saw the elite traits in McLaurin. And there was really not much else. And he just put it all together. He made that team turn right around, and hard not to believe in him. So we left him in a tier of his own. And I think, he's actually the most valuable player I don't have any exposure to, which really sucks. But it is what it is. I can't buy him. Well, I can buy him right now. It's just really expensive to buy him right now. And I think that our cash price we have listed here is 5 first. I think that's about fair, and I think some people would even say no. And obviously we're not talking, most people don't just have 5 first to throw at a quarterback and still be where they want to be. We're talking probably a tier up from a quarterback with a couple firsts, or maybe 3 firsts, something like that. But man, it's hard to pry Jayden Daniels off of the manager who has him right now.
Yeah, I think if you throw 4 first at a manager, they're probably not going to really consider it that much. So yeah, I think 5 first would have to be what it is for cash price. But if we're going to look to tier down to our tier 2, we're going to be looking to get a first and maybe a little bit of a plus depending on what player you're looking at. The veteran pivots, we're going to be looking at one for every single tier, at least 1 or 2 pivots minimum. And so if you want to pick up some flexibility, you could pivot down to Jalen Hurts and pick up a first round pick. Now he's a little bit older and there's more upside, it seems like, with Jayden Daniels right now. Or you might be able to get Burrow in a first. I think I'd probably want a little bit more if I'm getting Burrow. I think I like Hurts more, but no, I think that's roughly the price that you have to pay. So getting the extra first, that could get you a starting running back or just anything in season. So I think this is very likely to happen in a lot of leagues.
Yeah, oddly enough, I tried when I was doing the veteran pivots not to use players that are cornerstone assets. Hurts is the only one that I used here, and I found that I kind of had to, because it didn't make sense to trade Jayden Daniels for Patrick Mahomes and some first. I think you're going to need 3+ first round Patrick Mahomes to get there, and that just felt not the most actionable. Most people aren't going to be in a situation to make that trade, and most people aren't really going to want to pull that off anyways. So look, if I can get Jalen Hurts plus a first, I think Hurts is 2 years older, so you're not losing that much age. You've got similar production production and you're getting a first and flexibility. I do like that if you need the extra asset. Obviously, more shallow leagues, we're not really thinking about that too hard. And I don't disagree too much. Maybe I want a second on top of Burrow plus that first if I can get it. If I'm really desperate, though, I might still consider that.
Yeah, I like that Jaden Daniels, he didn't have a super team around him, and he still was really, really good. But no, still Jalen Hurts, he has that right now, and Howie Roseman has built that. So if they can sustain that, it's going to be great for Jalen Hurts. And he's not really the guy who's running like long touchdowns and making guys miss. He's more of just hammering in the short yardage. So I think that's going to be sustainable for him. But let's go ahead and look at our tier 2, who Jalen Hurts is there as a cornerstone piece, as you alluded to. And we also have wide receiver Jamar Chase, Malik Neighbors, and Brock Bowers. Now, we got 2 guys who are rookies from this fantastic class. So, I mean, right here, 3 of our top 5 players are rookies from this past year. So this was a phenomenal class. If you had a lot of picks, you're probably pretty darn happy. So Brock Bowers, is he somebody that you would pay like a first and 2 seconds to get to Jaden Daniels?
I mean, that one's roster specific, right? If I need a quarterback, and I guess if I need a quarterback, then what else I need doesn't necessarily matter. But like, can you always afford to trade that? Maybe not. But yeah, I think Brock Bowers a first and a second or 2 to get me to a quarterback that is not just a good quarterback, but one of the first 3 picks in most startups. That's a fair price to pay. I think that about any of these players, except it's really hard to do that with Hurts and Chase. Like Neighbors and Bowers, they're both rookies they're both going into their second year. They both had incredible rookie years, but we've seen players have great rookie years and then maybe not fall completely off, but show that, maybe that was their ceiling. So yeah, if I can get into Jaden Daniels, who also is in his second year and also that applies to, but he's a quarterback and he kind of has that special league breaking ability that not everybody has. So I think I would for Bowers and Neighbors. Jamar and Hurts, though, that's hard because they both have that league breaking ability and we know that for sure as well.
Yeah, we think that Malik Neighbors has that, and he showed a ceiling pretty close to that already as a rookie. So there's no guarantee that a player is going to get better as he goes along his career, but a lot of times they do. And I mean, Malik Neighbors, we just expect his value to stay up here for a long time. He's still 21 years old. Yeah, I mean, he was 20 when he entered the draft. It's just crazy. So I think Jamar Chase, he's just, obviously everybody wants him. Probably will be top here just based on his points for a few years before he starts to age out. But yeah, no, this is a phenomenal tier. If you have anybody here, I think you're pretty set. You want at least one of these guys to really feel like one of those super teams probably, but I think you could get some guys from tier 3 and 4 to really build that as well. It doesn't need to be so top heavy.
Yeah, really, if, big picture here, if you have a handful of any of the guys we're going to talk about in this video, your team's probably looking pretty darn good and pretty healthy for a long time. So let's go ahead and talk about some trade value here. We have 3 plus first there, emphasis on the plus. I think, format depending, you get a little more shallow, that plus gets a little bigger, you get a little deeper in the format, maybe that plus goes away. Probably can get some of these guys for 3 firsts in some deeper leagues. As we talked about, tier up, roughly a first, maybe a small plus. Tier down, we'll see, you'll see what players we're talking about here in a minute, but a first, maybe a 1-2 swap in some of these cases, but more than likely a first. Then some of these veteran players trying to pivot to a quarterback, probably get Baker plus a first and a second. I know it feels kind of weird because you're getting so old, but that extra draft capital does help. Same thing for Nico. I think you can get a first and a second on top of Nico for one of these wide receivers. And then, hey, Bowers to Kittle, you're probably not giving up any points. You might be able to get a couple firsts on top there, maybe a little more. I think that might be a stretch just because of how good Kittle is. But man, I've knocked on the Bowers door a couple times this offseason, and there's no budging. I'll tell you what.
Yeah, nobody wants to move off of any of these players, honestly. Maybe because Jalen Hurts is coming off a slightly down year. But yeah, when a guy has, especially Jamar Chase, coming off a wide receiver one season, people think that's just going to keep on happening, which I think if you play the odds, he probably won't. But obviously, he's the one I'd bet on at this point. But no, I would love to, if I feel like I am needing some more assets to compete, I would love to move off of Bowers for Kittle. And I might want a little more than 2 first, like you said, because you're getting, like 8 years older or so, maybe 10, somewhere in that range. Like, I don't know their ages off the top of my head. But yeah, no, this would be a good move, I think, if you're trying to retool. I think these are the situations you're looking at. But let's go ahead and look at our tier 3.
Yeah, this is a pretty fun group of players here. I think a lot of people might put some of these players in tier 2. We've got our top 3 running backs, Bijan, Jahmyr Gibbs, and Ashton Jeanty, first rookie making the list here. A couple of receivers, Brian Thomas Jr., Puka Nacua, and tight end Trey McBride. Pretty fun group of guys here. So I don't know, let's start talking about these running backs first. I think some people might try to argue at least Bijan and Gibbs in tier two. I don't know. I just struggle to put running backs there. Do you think that's something we need to consider a little more strongly than we probably did in our discussions?
I think they're on the fence. I think realistically, you could have maybe squished these tiers together. I think you could say the same for McBride. Maybe isn't that much off of Brock Bowers. I don't think that there's a huge gap between tier 2 and 3. I think Brian Thomas Jr. Puka might be a little more at the bottom, but I just can't see myself drafting any of these guys above Malik Neighbors, Brock Bowers right now. Maybe these guys go 2, 3 picks apart in a startup, so I don't think it's that drastic. So it's pretty thin line between these two. Between the bottom guys and the top guys here. And I mean, do you want to go ahead and start Trey McBride? I know the three of us, with Justin included, had a discussion with where he was supposed to be, but at first you wanted him in tier 2. Is that correct?
Yeah, my brain when we decided to do Cornerstone tiers thought let's group positional tiers together. So like our QB ones that qualified are tier one, and that's just Jaden Daniels, and then our wide receiver ones and our QB twos were in the next tier. And ages obviously knock out some of these players. Like you didn't see Justin Jefferson or CeeDee Lamb in tier two because they're a little bit older than our cutoff. But when we started to look at it, we thought, man, Trey McBride just doesn't seem to quite fit in tier two. Like I think the market would suggest very strongly that we were wrong to put him there. So we started talking about it, and the big question I had was, well, if we're going to put them in different tiers here, but the same tier in tight end, we need to be able to explain that. And so I thought about it a little bit, and basically there's kind of 2 points that I want to make here. They're kind of the same point, but depending on how your brain works, hopefully at least one of them, sits in here. When you're looking at the tight end tier, for example, like think about the range of value. Brock Bowers is a mid-first startup pick, let's call it. The last guy we talk about is, they're probably going in the 10th, 11th round of startup. So we're talking about 10 rounds of startup value here. These guys, like we just said at the top, they're all gone by the end of the third. So the range of value is much more squished. So the bounds of each tier is going to be a little tighter. And you can kind of think about that if you're actually plotting the players in this as well. Like the top of that tight end tiers, very sparse. And then as you get closer, they kind of get tighter and tighter. But up at the top, you're going to have a little bit wider of a value bound. So I think that made a lot of sense to me. Like, okay, we're talking about a tighter group of value here. So that border is going to change a little bit, and it might tighten to the point where some players get kicked up or down from where they were in their positional tiers. And that's what we decided with Trey McBride. I think it fits better. You guys let us know in the comments below if you think McBride does belong in tier 2. But I kind of like this grouping. I think it all fell into place once we decided to make that change.
Yeah, I think if McBride was 23 years old, I might have pushed more for him belonging in tier 2. But it's just the 3-year age gap between him and Brock Bowers. I think is enough to push him down, because once McBride's 27, I think he's going to slowly start to come down in value, unless he's just like tearing it apart like Travis Kelce did for a while, where he's just tight end one over and over again. But I mean, Ashton Jeanty being here, if you look at just the redraft markets, he's expected to be top 5 running back. I know an underdog, he was going as RB4. It's flipped to where CMC is going ahead of him now. I'd still prefer Jeanty just from a risk point of view, because at CMC, I mean, the injuries they're pretty scary. I have him in a couple leagues, excited, but also pretty scared. Without Jeanty, I'm just excited because I know he's going to get the volume, and I'm not as worried about the injury concerns. So I think you had to put him here, 21 years old. Bijan was immediately up here. Gibbs was close because people might have thought he was slightly overdrafted, but these guys that get top 10 draft capital, I mean, he was almost top 5, I believe. He was the 6th pick in the NFL draft. So, I mean, these guys, they hit at such an incredibly high rate. They get fed volume. The team has a plan for them. And he's one of the best prospects we've seen. So I think it makes sense for him to be here as well.
Yeah, his production is unknown, which we'd love to have known production as our cornerstone assets, but the market is putting him in this range, and B, like you just laid out, great draft capital, great prospect going into a situation where he has basically no competition. You've got an offensive coordinator that loves to run the ball. You've got a head coach that loves to run the ball. Production's going to come. The points are going to come. I think we all believe that. So I'm not really worried about putting him in here and considering him this, important to your teams that do have him. And, as much as I don't like to build around running backs, these 3 guys, it's really hard to not view them anything else except core assets on your team. You got to value them as such. So I don't know. I think it's a changing of the guard, but I'm happy it's happening. I think it's nice because it's been hard to collect wide receivers the last couple of years, like I like to do. So I hope it continues. I hope this year's class is good, like we assume, and running back maybe is back.
Yeah, and I think that there's definitely a chance of that, but I think we also see waves of some positions. Some years they're just not as good, some years they're better. We're on the upswing for the RBs right now, so this might be as high as they go, and we might have a down year for running back this upcoming year. And I just think that the risk for injury, like a bad ACL injury, is just tougher to come back from for a running back. Their value just isn't as insulated. And now that they're going into year 3, they injure themselves now without that. They go into the last year of the contract in year 4. I don't know. Just things become shakier. Then if a guy like Brian Thomas Jr. tears his ACL, I think his value will drop. Obviously, any of theirs would, but I don't think it'll drop that much just because we know how good he is. He's a wide receiver. Their careers are longer. So, yeah, I think we have similar concerns. But if you look at the points per game for the running backs, like I said, we're on an upswing, but 20 points per game, 21 points per game for Bijan and Gibbs, whereas Brian Thomas Jr. Puka are right around 16, 18. So I think there's definitely a case that they could be pushed up, but I'm not quite there.
Yeah, I kind of think back into the first is the highest in startup value that I think running backs will be generally seen. I know we've seen a couple people reach here and there in startup. I think that's about where the running back ceiling is. And I think that's fair. And I think it'll stay that way no matter how good the position gets. Let's go ahead and talk about some trade value here for these guys. We did put 2 to 3 first. We'll kind of hang out here on that for a second because I think that's important to talk about. We discussed maybe just leaving it at 3 first because I think in most situations, that's probably what it's going to take. I do think, though, in deeper formats, whether it's best ball or start 12 or 14 team leagues, whatever it is, it's just hard to spend that many valuable assets to consolidate down into one. So I do think league format dependent, it's between 2 and 3, but I think it's probably closer to 3. Maybe some cases there's even a small plus. I don't know, JP, you want to expand on that thought a little bit?
Yeah, that was kind of my first thought was like, yeah, it's probably 3 first, but maybe I could see scenarios where it is a deeper format. You could send 3 first to get Brian Thomas Jr. like a second back or something. I think that might be doable. So I don't think it's far off. I think it's closer to 3 first for sure, though. And if you're looking to tier up, I mean, they'll align a little bit depending on which side of the 2 to 3 first you're looking at here. But to tier up, okay, so it's tier up 1 tier to tier 2. Hold on, my brain is trying to process at first. Okay, so if you're trying to tier up from this 3rd tier up to the 2nd tier, you're probably going to have to pay somewhere around a first or a 1-2 swap. It depends. I mean, I think Jamar Chase is going to be a little harder to get than Malik Neighbors just by a little bit. And if you're trying to tier down to tier 4, you're probably going to pick up a first or a 1-2 swap as well on that way down. But David, who are we looking at for veteran pivots?
So veteran pivots here, you're still getting studs back in return. We said Saquon plus a first and a second, AJ Brown plus a first, Kittle plus a first, somewhere in those ranges. I do think, like we talked about with Kittle and 2 firsts for Bowers, maybe for McBride, you want a little bit more than a first on Kittle there. But I think he's still got a good few years left as a hammer. AJ Brown, kind of the same situation, a few years younger, but also a wide receiver, not a tight end. And man, Saquon, if you're looking for those points, that's the only guy really that's going to fill in those points. Maybe Henry, but I just really struggle to pivot from Bijan down to Henry or something like that. So I think Saquon is the target if you're looking for a veteran pivot off one of these running backs.
Yeah, unless you're very hungry for some risk appetite there with like CMC and Derrick Henry. Yeah, it's tough. There's not a lot of great older running backs anymore that we feel super confident in. I guess it would just have to be those 3. They're all drafted as top 6 running backs right now in the market, and then you go down to guys like Jonathan Taylor and whatnot. But regardless, I think the wide receiver one is the most interesting. Because, I mean, I think some people really, really like A.J. Brown still. I do, too. I think when you look at the pass rate for the Eagles last year, it was super low. History tells us that's going to bounce back up. You're not going to be able to steamroll teams. So I think he could have a bounce back year. So I could definitely see moving off Puka for A.J. Brown in a first. I think that's very likely. So why don't we just go ahead and jump down to our 4th tier here. So we have 3 quarterbacks here with Caleb Williams, Drake May, and Bo Nix. Talking about that 2024 draft class right there. All top 10 picks. I think Bo, what was he, 12th? He might have been 12th. All top 12 picks. And we have Drake London as well, who was the center of our tier conversation in the wide receiver tier video. But now he's 24 years old. And he came up with 16.5 PPR points per game season, being drafted as a top 10 fantasy asset in the redraft markets right now. So I think we feel pretty good about Drake London right now. And these quarterbacks, they all shown flashes. Bo Nix showed the most production-wise, but obviously he's the oldest. It's funny enough. Next year, he'll be in his last year of our Cornerstone tier age cutoff already. It's crazy enough. But no, I think Caleb Williams, there's a lot of optimism there. He showed flashes. The offense with Ben Johnson should be exciting, and Drake May just showed flashes in the worst offensive situation probably in all the NFL last year.
Yeah, I wonder if Penix will ever even qualify for this list, or is he already too old?
Tyler Shuck, I think, what is he, barely?
Tyler Shuck, another good throw out there. I don't think he'll ever be good enough to qualify for the list either, but he might have already aged out. I think this is a really interesting tier. it feels like a ton of risk reward here for this group. Obviously, you feel comfortable having them in the bigger picture of things, but when we're just talking about cornerstone assets here, these three quarterbacks, like there's still some questions about them. They could all still bust. I don't think they will. I'd be surprised if all three bust. I wouldn't be surprised if all three hit still. I mean, Bo Nix had a terrific season. I think we just have some questions about the offense around him and whether he can repeat it. Caleb, they did a great job this offseason. I hate saying that as a Packers fan, but I'm actually nervous about the Bears. I think they're going to have a good offense. I think Caleb is going to have that season. Drake May, unfortunately, still has some concerns about his offense. It should be better than last year, thankfully. But all three of them do carry a certain amount of risk that you wouldn't like your cornerstone assets to have. So I do feel weird building around them, but also like the upside is just so good there. So I don't know. Do you feel kind of the same way about that group of quarterbacks there?
Yeah, definitely. As excited as I am about all of them, especially Drake May. We've seen quarterbacks before. I remember Baker Mayfield's rookie year, where I mean, he had better rookie year than any of these guys, but then he just fell off a cliff, and nobody wanted him for a couple of years. We forget. I mean, he bounced around to the Rams before he got to the Bucks. So I mean, it's not a definitive thing that these guys are going to improve. Like I mentioned earlier, it's not a straight line where it just continues to go up. That's not how it always works. There's ups and downs. Some guys progress better than others. Some regress. So I think any of these guys, maybe not Bo and London, but I think Caleb Williams could be your 107 in startups next year if they have a big year. I think that's very reasonable. I think there's a little bit more safety with London and Bo, though, because of Bo's rushing floor. Although I think May is very underrated and might have as much of a rushing. But anyways, we know that Bo Nix has a good ecosystem there with the offensive line and Sean Payton. But Drake London, I think he's somebody that you're not quite as high on.
I think the value makes sense. My thing with London, it's not that I don't like London. I think he had a great season. He's a really good young player still. I just really like the next group of wide receivers we're going to talk about in tier 5 as well. So if I can get an actual plus to move from London down to one of those guys, I just find it really hard not to, because I think they're all very similarly valued in my mind, at least. And I think that's a good transition. We'll go ahead and talk about the value on this tier. And I'll just kind of skip down this slide since I was talking about to tier down. I think a first or a 1-2 swap, when you look at it, is about what the market would say. And, that's maybe not Lad McConkey. Some people are kind of split. Maybe some people think Lad belongs up here, but let's just take JSN. Spoiler alert, he's in tier 5. So give me JSN in a first for London in a second. That's not even a question for me. But I think the market would say that some people would prefer London in the second. I don't know. Does that seem like about a fair value trade to you, or does that sound off as well?
I'm on your side there. As much as I like London, I don't think that his projection is going to be that much greater. He's going in the top of the second round in underdog markets. Those guys are going third, so maybe that's a big gap to some people, but I don't think these wide receivers talent-wise are that much different. So, yeah, if I can get a first to switch between them, I think I would. If it's like a late second, I think I'd probably stick with London still. So I definitely understand that side of it. And if we're trying to tier up to the guys we just talked about previously in tier 3, you could probably gonna have to pay a first. I mean, we said it was about 3 firsts in value for the guys up there with Trey McBride and Bijan. Yeah, I think you're definitely going to have to pay a first to get up there. The cash price, like you said, is 2 firsts. But let's look at some veteran pivots, though, David.
Yeah, real quick, I'll just want to touch on that tier up price. I did throw in 1-2 swap there. My thinking was there's 3 quarterbacks in this tier, none in tier 3. So if you have quarterbacks, sometimes that gives you a little boost in trade value. So you might be able to find the right person who needs that quarterback help and take advantage of that. But you're right. It's probably going to cost more than a 1-2 swap most of the time. But let's jump to these veteran pivots. Dak in a first, I think, is a good way to go. I don't know if I'm doing that for a playoff first, but certainly if it's a playoff or a first that might miss the playoffs, that could be a beneficial trade. Mahomes in a second, like some people are gonna have Mahomes higher rated than these players, so they wouldn't consider a plus. But if you're looking to get younger at the position, I could see adding a second to Mahomes to get one of these guys. And again, if you're just looking for the production and a little extra flexibility, I could see wanting to take on that second. And then T. Higgins from London, I think you're probably going to need that first, but maybe a 1-2 swap if you find someone who's a little lower on him, or if that's a quality first, obviously, depending on the first. Still looking at some very quality veterans here if we're trying to pivot off these young players.
I don't know if it's just because we're so close to the season now, but these veteran pivots they're just sounding pretty appetizing throughout. I mean, is it just me, or do you kind of feel that way too?
Yeah, I mean, part of it is getting close to that season, but man, it's always nice to find a way to squeeze a first and not hurt your lineup. Like, that's just such a good feeling. It does suck. In my opinion, trading away a core asset and not getting one back is really hard. But if I'm going to do it, I'm getting a first. Like, almost guaranteed because that's basically the only way I'm going to do that. So yeah, man, you give me Dak, I know injuries are a thing, but they're a thing for everyone. I think Dak has at least a handful of years left at high quality play. You get that plus a first. I don't know. That is pretty enticing. Higgins and a first for London. That sounds fun. And I think you can get these things done. Like I don't think we're out of line on our suggestions here. So I don't know. I kind of agree, but also I love my young players. So it's hard to pull the trigger. I do understand that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you're still playing at start 9, start 10, especially if you have a lot of first round picks, yeah, I'd probably rather tier up, and you want to consolidate those assets where, especially for the guys that in the first 3 tiers, in my opinion, because those guys we know are hammers. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on to our 5th tier, our last tier here.
Yeah, here's the big one. I'll go ahead and read it since I know who's in it. It is, I believe, 9 players long. We've got CJ Stroud, Jordan Love, Brock Purdy at quarterback, Devon Achane, Omarion Hampton at running back, and then Marvin Harrison Jr., Jackson Smith and Jigba, Lad McConkey, and Garrett Wilson at wide receiver. This group was a little too big for my new graphic style, so we're going to start this conversation with just the quarterback portion of this tier. An interesting group of people here. Jordan Love's probably making his one and only appearance as he's getting older and about to age out. Purdy's getting up there in age too. Stroud only 23, but I think all 3 of these guys you're very comfortable having at QB2, and you love your quarterback room if that's the case. If you're relying on one at quarterback 1, I've got a group where I've got Jordan Love and Brock Purdy. I don't feel terrible about that quarterback room. Yeah, I mean I've got a team with Love and Purdy as my quarterback 1 and 2, however you want to sort it, and I'm okay with that. I would love a stronger QB1 there, but I think they can carry me together. If you've got one of these guys as your QB1 and then like Michael Penix or something Tua as your QB2, like you're pretty nervous about that, I think. So I don't know, this is right on the borderline of can he be my QB1, but they're still young enough that they're going to hold their value for a while. And in Superflex, I think that's still pretty valuable. Obviously, these guys are a little bit easier to let go of than the quarterbacks we've talked to this point, but they're still pretty valuable assets. And I think Purdy's underrated. I think Love was injured so much last year that he got kind of a bad rep, and kind of the same thing with Stroud with his wide receiver core, his horrible line play. So I think all 3 of these guys carry a lot of upside as well.
Oh my gosh, just the PTSD of his offensive line. And I don't know if it's going to be that much better. I don't know if it can be worse, but the additions I thought were not that great. But yeah, these guys, they really don't have the rushing baseline on a week-to-week basis. So it seems like their consistency is going to hurt a little bit, and their ceiling on a season-long basis is going to be pretty limited. But no, any of these guys could have one of those 35-plus touchdown seasons, and they could be the QB 8 or 9, I think, pretty easily. I mean, what Baker Mayfield did this year, they could probably get something close to that. I don't know when that'll come, though. I can't predict that, but yeah, I think that's all in their range of outcomes. But let's go ahead and look at the other players that we have in this tier. And we have 2 running backs here with Devon Achane and Omarion Hampton, both very interesting. And Achane, I think he's got the best case to be a hammer outside of those top 6 running backs in redraft with the 3 older guys and the 3 young guys we've already talked about. When he was with Tua, he was really, really good. And injuries have been a concern. I think it's not as much. Now he's proven to be relatively durable for his size. Although that was a big concern. I think Gibbs being Gibbs and then not being really good and staying healthy has also helped his case here too. But now both these running backs are very interesting. But Hampton, I might have to wait a few weeks for it to really emerge more. But with the Najee Harris news, which he injured his eye, if anybody didn't hear, during a fireworks incident, maybe Hampton is set up to be on the fast track to be the starter.
Yeah, let's talk about some trade value here. Cash price, I think 1 to 2 firsts. Again, talking about depending on how deep the format is and certain other scoring settings might decide whether that's 1 first, 2 firsts, or a good first or 2 medium firsts, whatever it may be. We've talked about tiering up to tier 4 based on talking about how to tier down from tier 4. So I think that one we've already discussed. Tiering down from tier 5 to tier 6, we're probably talking about like the group of rookies, the 2 wide receivers, Tet and Hunter. We're talking about Cam Ward, probably Bucky Irving, Travion Henderson, those kind of guys. Not really sure if like JJ McCarthy makes maybe in that too. So think about that kind of group of players for tiering down. Probably talking a first still, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. I think 1-2 swap in some cases is pretty appropriate though. You feel about the same for that tier down?
Yeah, I think it'd probably be more like a 1-2 swap for the Travis Hunter, Ted McMillan types. And I think I'm probably closer to 2 firsts for cash price, like kind of like what you're saying there. But I mean, I still feel really good about this group. I think once you get down to Travis and Ted, it's just a lot of confusion. I think we could have had a 6th tier with those guys. it just kind of depends on how you define cornerstones, because those guys, their value is right there and their age is there for the cornerstones, but they're just not proven in the NFL yet, which these guys are. I feel very good about all these guys. You know how I feel about Marv. I feel like he needs to show just a bit more, but I mean, he's got the name value, he's got the value and everything, so he definitely belongs up here. But I think I would really like to tier down to this range for the wide receivers specifically. I think this is a beautiful range. I think after these guys, it does drop off, especially when you're looking at contending and rebuilding rosters in general.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not much of a take guy. I don't know if this counts as a hot take or not. You let me know. But I think Marv's going to be a tier 1 receiver at the end of the year. Call me a homer, whatever you got to do. He's just so good, man. I know that this is a homer take at this point, but when he was at Ohio State, his work ethic was off the charts. Everybody always talked about it, his drive, his passion. I think so many rookie wide receivers outperforming his rookie season has just been eating at him. I think they're going to find a way to get him better involved because these coaches are probably going to get fired if they don't. I know it would take a great season, but I just think it's going to happen. I think he's putting it all together. I think he's going to be a tier 1 wide receiver.
You give him Justin Herbert, and I'm in on that. That's my biggest thing. I don't love the fit with Kyler Murray, but
I get it. I do. And I don't have a good comeback on that. I really don't, other than the fact that I think the coaches will get fired if they have another bad offensive year and don't make the playoffs. You got to figure out how to get Marv involved. You just have to.
yeah, if you just look at the amount of in-space attempts that they gave him, wasn't much. They just stuck him out on an island and just said, go win, which is the hardest thing to do in the NFL. And he's a rookie with a quarterback that doesn't like to push these outside, really high difficulty of throws. And yeah, I just don't love the fit, but I don't know. I think he will make progress not only as a player but also in his role. So I think there's definitely some hope there. I mean, if you look at the best ball streets, he's being drafted alongside JSN and Garrett Wilson, which whenever I'm on the clock, I'm picking those guys over Marv every time. But I definitely understand the upside case there because of how talented he is. I mean, you look at reception perception, he's still one of the best route runners. He's got the size, and I know I don't think I think he's maybe overhyped looking back on things, but I don't think it was by a wide margin necessarily. But I love Ladd. He's the guy I would love to target. If you can get him at this value with these players, I love that. I push for him to be in a tier with Nico and Drake London because if you look at how he did week 9 on, he was amazing. I don't think they added much to take away from him. They added Trey Harris, but I don't think that really takes anything away from Ladd. Maybe it helps stretch the field a little bit because they did not have anybody who could get open downfield outside of Ladd last year. So I really like him a lot. I think he could be a top 8 wide receiver in this season. But enough play take.
I think actually ADP wise, he does fit above in tier 4. I'm just trying to pull that up right now. Oh, he's actually right after Marv. They're back to back, but so yeah, I guess he fits there. But London is only a few spots ahead of these guys too. That's the thing about these tiers, as we talked about kind of when we were talking about McBride there. It's such a tight cluster of value that it's like if you disagree with us, we're not going to fight you too hard on how to sort through these tiers. This is just how we view them. And like while I say they're really close in value, you notice these tiering up and down prices are almost always like a first or more, or even a 1-2 swap at worst. So like it is a tight grouping of value, but there's still value to be squeezed out of these players by moving around in the proper ways. And that's why I think this value or this video topic is important, because if you can get a couple extra firsts to move from Jamar Chase to Ladd McConkey, you might be able to get even 3 firsts if you did it the right way. Man, your roster's gonna be looking great, because then you can just go buy CeeDee Lamb for those firsts, and then all of a sudden you've got CeeDee Lamb, Ladd McConkey. I know that's not actually going to happen, but that's the kind of process that we're trying to talk through here. It would take a perfect situation to get Ladd and 3 firsts for Jamar, and then move those 3 firsts for CeeDee Lamb. I understand that, but that's just kind of a gross example of what we're trying to do here. So yeah, I think Ladd's a great target. I like JSN. I'm a little worried about that offense. Kind of the same thing with Marv. I really believe in Marv. I do believe in JSN as well. 3 of my Buckeyes here on this list here that I like all pretty highly. But I think Ladd is absolutely in this group, and I think you made a really strong case to put him with London when we talked about wide receiver tiers, and it was hard to disagree with. So I'm excited to watch everyone on this list, but especially that group of 4 wide receivers. I think that's a really strong tier.
All right, with the most recent Noah Fant release news, I put out a tweet saying the Seahawks' 2nd, 3rd, and 4th target earner from 2024 are no longer on the roster.
JSN, baby.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I even put in the tweet. I said that could mean a few different things. JSN could lead the NFL in targets, if not be right in that neighborhood. And that opens the door for like Elijah Arroyo, Torrey Horton. But anyways, we're not discussing those players in this show. I just love the opportunity for JSN. Darnold is not my favorite quarterback. He's good enough probably though, especially if he's going to be getting that kind of volume. So yeah, JSN wheels up this year. But if we're looking up to move off of JSN, who are our veteran targets here, David?
Yeah, honestly, I thought this was a pretty fun group of pivots as well. If you're a Justin Fields believer, long term, I think this is a smash. Fields in a first for one of these quarterbacks. Short term, you're probably getting more points. Let's be honest. You're probably getting more points this year, and you're getting a first. We do have concerns about how long Fields will be starting, so that's something to factor in there. But that's what you're getting the first for. It's taking on that risk. One of these wide receivers we love, you think Tyreek Hill isn't shot, you could probably get a first and a second. You might be able to get a little bit more if the manager's really sick of Tyreek. Kind of hard to nail down his value. I still think he has another elite year or two left in him, though. So at that price, like, again, you might be getting more points on your roster and getting the draft capital to get a little older. And then the running backs to Josh Jacobs, I think we're talking about pretty much even points swap there. So it's just a 1-2 swap because Jacobs is still a little bit younger, has a couple years left in the tank, hopefully, at that production level. But man, all these guys, as many or more points, plus you're getting probably a first in the deal at least. That's like you said last year, that's pretty attractive.
Yeah, I definitely think the veteran pivots are good options. But we always talk about if you can consolidate, if you need to consolidate, I think it's a good move to do as well. But sometimes you have to retool, and these veteran pivots, that's the way to keep your roster alive. Sometimes when you might think, I need a small upgrade. So definitely think it's a good idea and something to consider. But that does it for our Cornerstone tiers. But thank you all for listening to the Dino Construction Podcast.
Just, remember to like and subscribe wherever you listen and view. And hopefully you found this episode as helpful for you as it was for us.